Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a really fundamental shift in how we think about the businesses and institutions all around us. We're talking about a journey, from seeing organizations as simple machines to viewing them as complex, living organisms. So to really get our heads around this, you've got to understand two big competing ideas. On one side, you have the closed system. This is where you think of an organization like a machine. It's static, it's predictable, and it's totally focused on what's happening inside. But on the other side, you've got the open system, which sees an organization more like a living thing, dynamic, always adapting, and deeply, deeply connected to the world around it.
For a long, long time, the main way people looked at organizations was as these self-contained machines. The thinking was pretty straightforward. If you can just perfect what's happening on the inside, you've basically won the game.
The key word here, the whole philosophy, is separation. The closed system model basically treats the outside world as if it's almost irrelevant. The main goal? Well, it was simple. Make all the internal parts, all the gears of the machine, run as smoothly and efficiently as humanly possible. And you do that through really careful planning and super tight control.
Now, this idea didn't just pop out of nowhere. Its roots go back to Frederick Winslow Taylor's scientific management, which was totally obsessed with finding the single, one best way to do any given job. It's a very mechanical, very rigid way of thinking. Later on, that evolved into finding optimal solutions in systems theory, but it still had that heavy, heavy internal focus.
But then, starting around the 1960s, this revolutionary idea started to take hold. People began to argue that, no organization is truly an island. The outside world isn't just background noise, it's actively shaping everything a company does, every single day.
And look, this change didn't happen overnight. It was more of an intellectual evolution. The seeds were planted way back in 1948 with Norbert Wiener's work on feedback loops. But the idea really took off in 1966 when Katz and Kahn formally applied this open systems concept to organizations. And then just a year later, James Thomson came along and helped refine it even more. So what did this shift really mean? It meant we stopped seeing organizations as machines and started seeing them as living organisms. Think about it. Complex systems, constantly interacting with their surroundings, taking things in, putting things out, and having to adapt just to stay alive.
This list right here really gets to the heart of why the environment is so critical. It's the source of literally everything an organization needs to survive. Yeah, you've got the obvious stuff like money and people and materials. But you also have these less tangible, but just as vital, things like information, social support, and even legitimacy, which is basically its very right to exist in the eyes of society.
Okay, so once this new open systems door was kicked open, it just unlocked this incredible flood of powerful new theories, new ways of explaining how organizations really work. Let's just touch on 4 of the biggest ones.
First up, you've got resource dependency theory. The idea here is actually pretty intuitive. What an organization does is dictated by what it needs from the outside world. So, for example, if a company desperately needs some rare mineral from a single supplier, you can bet that one single dependency is going to shape almost every strategic decision it makes.
Next, there's organizational ecology. This theory kind of zooms out and looks at entire industries like their ecosystems. It argues that the environment, market forces, new technologies, what customers want, it selects which types of organizations get to survive and thrive, and which ones just die out. It's basically Darwinism, but for companies.
Then you have institutional theory, which adds another really fascinating layer to all this. It says that survival isn't just about getting resources or crushing your rivals. Organizations are also under this powerful social pressure to just fit in. They have to conform to the unwritten rules and expectations of their industry and of society, just so they're seen as legitimate and trustworthy.
And finally, there's network theory. This one reimagines the whole environment as a complex web of relationships. So it's not just a place you get stuff from. It's a dynamic network of connections with your suppliers, your customers, your partners, even your competitors. And where you sit in that web, that can be your greatest strength or your biggest weakness.
Okay, so we've talked history, we've talked theory. Why does any of this stuff from the 1960s actually matter so much today in our super connected, crazy fast-changing world?
Well, it all comes down to a few absolutely crucial points for anyone who works in or leads an organization. Because honestly, forgetting this shift in thinking, that can be a fatal mistake for any company out there.
At the end of the day, looking at an organization as an open system completely flips the script. It's not just about internal efficiency anymore. Survival now depends on adaptability. It means you have to recognize that your relationships are actually valuable resources, that the environment is constantly passing judgment, and that your reputation and legitimacy can be just as important as your bottom line.
You know, a couple of the pioneers of this way of thinking, Pfeffer and Solancic, they put it perfectly way back in 1978. Context is everything. You simply cannot understand what's going on inside an organization if you choose to ignore the world that exists outside its walls.
And that brings us to the final, critical question that I think we should all be asking about the places we work. Is your organization built like a rigid, old machine, totally focused inward and designed for a predictable world that doesn't exist anymore? Or is it behaving like a living organism, flexible, aware, and constantly adapting to not just survive, but thrive in an unpredictable future? The answer to that question might just determine everything.